Now this is Microsoft Excel, and right here we got different sheets. Sheets can contain information, and I'm gonna go through and I'll create a grade book for my son. And so down here where it says sheet one, I can double click that sheet one, and maybe he's taking math. You see right here to the side, there's a plus, and all versions of Excel have this. It may not be a plus, but you'll see some option down here to create a new sheet. And if you click that, it'll drop a new sheet on there. You can double click that, and I'll say English. Double click that, history, reserve word. That's interesting. American history. I don't think I'd ever seen that before. Now over here in the math, I already made this larger. Over here in English, in the bottom right-hand corner down here, there's a zoom. So if you need to see things bigger, you can come down here and grab that bar and move it over. I think it's also under the View tab here. There's a zoom here. So if you click the zoom, you can tell it how big you want it to be. So if what you're working with is small and you can't see, my eyes aren't too good, so I have to do this specially. You can use those. You can also hold down your Control key and then use your mouse wheel, and that'll make it bigger for you. To go back and forth between these tabs, again, you just click the tab down here and it goes to the other sheet. The entire Excel workbook, you can refer to it as a workbook, a spreadsheet, an Excel document, lots of different names they have for it. But each individual tab down here is a sheet. Okay, now these options across top here, you can click them. Home, insert, layout. These are all meant to provide a user-friendly way to work with these options. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to the home here, and I'll make up some data. This is again for my son Eric, so maybe I'd put his name on top here. I just start typing, and then you do a tab goes to the next cell, or you can press an enter, or you could even click outside of it. And maybe I'll have a homework category. There's different ways you can do grades. You could do grades based upon total points. You could do grades based upon a weighted factor. I like weighted factors myself. So for like homework, maybe that's going to be 40% of his grade. Now I'm going to click up here to change text you've already entered. If I click here, then I can click up here and start typing. And I can put 40% there to document it. And I'm going to add some homework assignments in here, and then I'll go back and put the next category. Now, maybe the first one is section 1.1. Then I do a tab. Next one is section 1.2, tab, section 1.3. And you could put however many you want. Now, maybe I need to keep track of the total points. So maybe this first row here is going to be total points. Well, I need to mark that in some way. And I didn't anticipate that I needed to put a total here. So really what I want this to say is total points possible. And then down here, I'll say received points. How many points did he get? And I'm not very good at naming these. So. But now this section 1.1 is in the wrong column. This is in column A, and that's where I put these titles here. To shift this over, you can click right here, and if I do a right click on that, you see there's an insert. And then I can shift cells down, shift cells right. I'll click shift cells right, and that moves them over. Another way to do that up here is there's a bunch of insert options here. And I assume, maybe not. Here it is. Under the home, there's an insert here. And this is where you can insert cells. And that would shift it over. I always just right click on it and choose insert or delete. So I never use that option up there. Okay, so let's say section 1.1 has a total of 20 points possible. And section 1.2 has 25 points, and section 1.3 has 15 points. Now receive points. Maybe on section 1.1 he got the full 20 points, so I'll put 20 there. Section 1.2 he got the full 25, so I'll put 25 there. Section 1.3 he got 10 of the points. Now we got some issues here. One of them is that I don't see all my words anymore. That's because this column is not the right width. Now, different ways you can adjust this. If I come up here between the A and B and put my mouse up there and have it just rest on that bar. If I click and hold down with my left mouse button while it's that black line with two arrows going each way, if I click and hold down my left mouse button, I can now drag this so it's a different size, so I can see it. If you ever mess up on your spreadsheet and you want to undo, well, your undo is right up here. This does a Control Z. Now, this Control Z is something you should memorize for every software package. Even ones that don't have a little arrow up there, almost everything has a Control Z. So if you mess up in a SOS, for example, you mess up on that grading application that is downloaded from and I probably won't get that legal organization right, HDSL, that my wife sends off the money for that. But I know what you mean. It's that legal defense fund. I didn't realize they had a great grading sheet out there, or transcript. If you mess up on that, Control Z probably will undo whatever you messed up. It doesn't always, but maybe 90% of the time the undo works. So remembering that Control Z is really nice for working with computers. Okay, so if I did a Control Z, it undoes that. There's also a redo up here, which is Control Y. I never remember that. Usually I never want to redo something after I undo it, but that would redo it. Now, I clicked this, dragged it, and moved it over. Another way is you can double-click it, and it'll make the column the right size. It won't make it too big, won't make it too small. It'll make it the right size to show every text that's in there. That's a nice option because you don't use up any extra space. Now over here, maybe these are too close together. Probably if I double click between the B and C, it won't help me much. Maybe a little bit. Double click here. Double click here. Double clicking is a fast way to change that. But grabbing it and dragging it gives you more control. Now, maybe another thing I don't like is that these aren't centered. Well, I can click in this cell right here. Now, what this cell is B5. If you ever played that game Battleship, where you put your ships down and the other person says B5 and you put a white or red, it's been been 30 years since I played it, I think. Maybe 20 years. You put either a white or a red peg down to indicate whether you hit the ship or you didn't hit the ship. So it's the intersection of the two. Well, same concept here. If I look up at here, that's a column B. And if I look over here, that's row 5. And so this is B5. You don't have to really know that, because if you click it, you notice up here in the name box it says B5. So it tells you what the name is. Now if I click and hold down with my left mouse button and drag, then it highlights those. And now that I got those highlighted, I can choose my formatting options up here. This is under the Home tab. Under the alignments, you'll have one that is center. And it's one where the lines look like they're centered in the middle. There's one where they're like centered on, or they're lined on the left side, one where they're lined on the right side. But this would be the middle. So if I click that, it centers them there. And I could change colors if I wanted to. If I click this, and I want it to stand out because it's a category. Up here, you have a font color. If I do the drop down on that, you can choose a different color. Maybe yellow. And right beside it is a fill color. Color the background of cells and to make them stand out. This is where if you just put your mouse over these and read, it'll tell you what it does. If I do the drop down here, and I choose blue, then I have that color scheme. Okay, now what I really want to do, and you could add in 100 sections like this. You could do it horizontally, you could do it vertically, however you want to do your points in your spreadsheet. Some people like vertically, up and down, just because then you don't have for one line, you don't have it on 10 different pages where you have to like put them side by side. Instead, they're just kind of like read naturally, where it's down like this. So that's kind of whatever you decide. Now we want to put a total column over here. So I'll go one space over here and I'll type total. Now I did a tab to get it out of there. Maybe I want to center this, so I'll click this and I'll come up here and click my center. Maybe I want it to stand out a little bit. So maybe I'll change the color to red. Like that. Now I want to add these numbers together. This is a concept called formulas. And I'm going to show a couple different ways of doing this. But I can do an equals. You start all formulas with an equals. And I want to add this cell plus this cell plus this cell. Well, this first cell here is B5. So I'll type B5. Plus, my next cell is C5. That's this one right here, the intersection of C and 5. Plus my next cell, which is D5. Again, you have to have the equals there, and then it has to look exactly like that. It can be lowercase. They don't have to be uppercase B and C and D. And then if you press enter, that adds those together. Now I could do the same thing down here, but one of the powers of Excel is that you can fill down or fill across or whatever. And it tries to guess what you want. Now if I come back up here, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so we can see the formula again. Remember this says B5, C5, and D5. Press escape, take it out of that. Now that I have this cell selected, in the bottom right hand corner it looks like there's a little square. And if I put my mouse over that, it changes to a black plus. And while it's a black plus, if I click and hold down my left mouse button and drag and fill down, then it'll copy that formula to the next cell down. But even more than that, If I go back to 60 here, remember this was a bunch of 5s across the way, B5, C5, and D5. If I come and look at this one, it says B6 plus C6 plus D6. So it automatically adjusted it when I filled it down. So I don't have to recreate the formula. Probably not too important when you got two formulas right here. But if you had 500 lines and you needed to put that formula 500 times, you wouldn't want to do that. You put it in your first one, you grab that bottom right-hand corner and fill down, and it'll fill it all down for you. There are shortcuts for filling it down, and I couldn't even tell you what they all are. That's the one I use. Okay, so here we see that Eric received 55 points out of the total 60. Now I'm going to double click this to bring it back down to reasonable size. Down here, maybe I want to put the category total. Now notice, you have to do some planning to get your spreadsheet to look good. This category total is fine, but it overlaps a little bit over to here. I could resize the column. I could double click this, make it bigger, but then this column here will be a different than this and be different than this. What I can do is I can merge cells. So I'm in B8 now. If I hold down my left mouse button and drag over here to highlight those two, there's a merge and center. This is under home, under alignment, there's a merge and center. Now this sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. If you have data already there, it gets a little bit tricky because sometimes you lose data. Depends upon where your data is stored at. Sometimes you're fine. Since I put my data in my first cell in B8, I think I'm going to be fine. If I click that, what it does is it merges those two cells into one cell. And automatically centers it, because that's what this is, merge and center. Although this drop down here, these are all the different items you could do. So if I wanted that centered, that's fine. I can leave it that way. But I'm going to come over here. I'm going to put my next formula. Category is worth 40%. So I'm going to take Eric's points, 55, divide by 60, and multiply that times 40. Now, sometimes I have to play with this myself. Do I multiply it times 40? Do I multiply it times 0.40? Oftentimes I'll get it wrong the first time, then I go back and correct it. So here I'm going to do an equals. And then I can come up here and I could type F6. That'd be no problem. You can also click here, and it'll put the F6 on there. And then I do divided by, and then I could click F5. And then times, and then 40%. Since I didn't store the 40% off in a cell anywhere besides documenting it next to the homework, then I'll just go ahead and type in 40. You'll know if you did it right or not, if you should have put 0.4 or 0 or 40. And I press enter, and that seems very reasonable. So that'd be my category total for homework. Now let's say I got a new section. I want to add in section 1.4. If I click up here at E through E4 and drag and fill down, highlight those. If I right click on it and choose insert, then I can shift cells right. Now move that over. Now let me put in section 1.4. It's going to be worth 30 points, and maybe Eric got 28 of those points. You notice that my formula didn't automatically update. So you have to be careful about that. Sometimes it'll update, sometimes it won't. I could come in here, and I clicked G5, and I could click up here. Let me make that bigger so you can see it. So I click in that cell, and I click up here. and you can see the formula. And then I could add in E5. And once I do that, see the color changes, and you press enter, and that add that additional column. Now let's say instead of doing these pluses, let's say I put another formula in, and it's the sum, auto sum. This is underneath the home, and over here in editing, you see an auto sum feature. And I'll click that. Now with the auto sum, it tries to guess what do I want to add together. And it's assuming I want to go from B5 over to F5. And that's not fine, or not fine. That's fine, we'll go with that. Now, you notice it's got an equals there. All formulas have equals, and sum, and then it does a beginning parentheses, that has to always be there. And then you put your beginning cell, which is B5, colon, your ending cell, which is F5, and then closing parentheses. You don't have to worry about that overly. If you click the auto sum, it puts that in there for you. But if you need to modify it, like maybe you don't want it to go to F5, you want it to stop at E5, then maybe you would click in here and change that to E5. But I'll press enter. Hasn't changed anything because it's still adding those four numbers together. Now I'll click in G5, and I'll click in the bottom right hand corner in that square, and I'll click and hold down, and then I'll bring it down here to fill down that formula. Now notice it now says equals sum B6 to F6, and that's what we have in our range here, B6 to, well, F6. So that's good. Okay, I could double click this to make it a little bit bigger. Let's say I want to put another cell in here. So I click and hold down my left mouse button, drag that, fill it down. Right click, choose insert, and shift cells right. Then I'll type in section 1.5. It's going to be worth 40 points. And maybe you got 28. You may have noticed something. Here, yeah, double click that, or no, that's nothing in that cell or column. Make that bigger. If I click in here, it was B5 to F5. It changed it to B5 to G5. So it recognized that I put new data in there. Sometimes it'll do that, sometimes it won't. So when you're inserting, I'd recommend you look at that and see if that value changed at all. If it didn't change, that means you need to modify your formula. Now I'm really wondering if I set this to F5, have it stop right here, if I do an insert on G, will it automatically update my formula? Well, let's try that. So I'll click in here. You can click up here to edit it, or you can, once you got the here, you can just type it. And I'm going to change that to F5. So I'm not referring to G5 at all. Now press enter. So let's come insert this. So again, I clicked G4, held on my left mouse button, dragged it down here, and highlighted all three cells. I right click and choose insert, and I shift cells right. Okay, so let's put in section 1.6. It's going to be worth 10 points, 8 points. Look at that. It was smart enough, even though I didn't go all the way over, it was smart enough to recognize what I wanted to do. Excel tries to anticipate your wishes when you're working with a spreadsheet. You'll notice that this formula worked a lot better, this sum, than it did with the pluses. If possible, if you're adding, you should use a sum. Okay, now I'm going to change this a little bit. I'll double click this, make it that, double click this. I'm going to bring H over. Just it's always good to double check. That says B5 to G5. This one, well, let me make that a little bit bigger so you can see it. This one says B6 to H6. Now, H doesn't have anything in it. Column H doesn't have anything in it. The sum ignores it if there's nothing in it, so you're fine. Escape takes you out of any cell if you start editing. You don't want to save what you're doing. And I'll double-click this again, put it back the normal size. These aren't centered, so I could click everything here and choose the center. There it goes. I had to click it twice, one to undo it. Because this was centered, but these two weren't. And it gives me my total. That's bizarre. That comes out exactly as 34. Now, a nice part about a spreadsheet is if you go through and set this up at the start of the school year, you put all your sections in here and so forth. Then, as you put your values in here, even if you change it, like you give it back to them, say, this one. I know you can do better than 28. I don't think you're putting effort into it. The Alpha, is it Alpha Omega SOS software? It seemed like it had a way that the teacher could reassign the assignment so they could redo it. It has its own grade book, so that's a bad example. But so he goes back and redoes it. Now I changed it to 35. Now notice the 119 at the end and notice the 34 and see what happens. So I changed both of them. That is so strange. It's still no decimals. Let me change this to 8.7. Okay. It's just the way the numbers came out, I guess. Now, if we do want decimals to show, if there's decimals by default, they should automatically be there. And okay, that's a good one. I'll put a 2 in there, and that causes a lot of decimal places. Maybe you don't want to see all those decimal places. That's overkill. Maybe you want one decimal. Maybe you want none. If I click this cell right here, up here in the home, you got different options. The one we want to focus on this time is number. I come over here to number, and if I do the drop down, these are all your different ways you can represent it. Currency, accounting, short date, percentage, fraction, and so forth. You can set individual options by choosing these. And these always seem backwards to me. They're little zeros. And this one looks like it's pointing to the right, which would make me think you're going to add more decimal places. But if I start clicking that reduces the number of decimal places. And it rounds. So you don't have to worry about that. You can take it back to no decimal places. If I choose this one next to it, that increases the number of decimal places. And let's say I want 2 decimal places. Now, here's a percent style. And it says formatted as a percent. You might think, well, that's what I want for this, which probably is not going to work. We'll try it and see. So if I click that, it tells me that Eric got 3,429% on that particular category. The issue there is what I mentioned earlier. If I click up here, this is our formula, and I told you that sometimes you put 40, sometimes you put 0.40. When you specify a percent format, it's wanting you to store this with a 0.40. So if I put a point there, then it'll give you that. And again, you can come up here and put decimal places, more decimal places if you want. But that gives you a nice look of having a percent symbol next to it. Okay, now I've pretty well got the homework like I wanted. So let me add a test category. Now, since I'm going to the side here, then vertically I don't need to put a lot of spaces in here. But even if I didn't, I can always insert rows and have it scoot down. So that's never an issue. let's say tests are going to be 50% of his grade. And I'm just typing that in. It has no mathematical meaning, has no formula meaning or anything. It's just documenting it. Come over here. There'll be test 1, test 2, test 3. Down here, I'm going to put the total points possible. This is really important if you're creating your own grade book. And receive points. Reason why is because he got 20, but out of what? If you don't have the out of what, then you have no reference of did he do well or not. 20 out of 20, he did pretty good. 20 out of 300 points, he did poorly. Okay. So then down here, I could put values if I want. If I don't want to put values, he hasn't taken any tests. You don't have to put any in there yet. Maybe 3 tests is all he's going to take. They're major ones. I know there'll be a lot more than that here, but you get the idea. I come over where I want to put the total at. I can put it here if I want, or if I want to have it in the same column as this, I could. It's up to you. So I'll click total here. It tries to guess when you do the auto sum what it's based upon. Since I don't have any numbers at all, let's see how smart it is. Up here in home, we'll click the auto sum. Not even close. It guessed the numbers up here. So sometimes auto sum's good, sometimes not. Now notice that my range of data is I5 colon I11. It tried to guess that. Since this is highlighted, all I have to do is come over here, click in B12, hold down my left mouse button, and drag. And it will put a new range in there. You now see it says B12 colon D12. If you want to type it in directly, you could. Again, it's your starting cell colon your ending cell. And then I press enter. It says 0. I'm going to fill this down. So I click cell I12 again. Put my mouse in the bottom right-hand corner in that little square. When it becomes a black plus, that means I can fill down. So I can click and hold down my left mouse button and drag it down. I just move my mouse down and then lit up. And that'll fill that in. Like I say, there's different ways of filling down. There's an option up here somewhere where you can fill it down. There's even a button you can click or an option. Let me do a Control Z. Maybe you double click that little square. Maybe not. If I highlight those and right click, is there a fill down? Don't know. I don't know. The method I always use 100% of the time is I click the cell I want. I click this when it becomes a black plus and move my mouse down, lit up, and that fills the formula down. Reason why I don't try to learn those other techniques is this gives me total control. I know exactly what I'm doing, not what Excel's guessing I'm going to want, but I know exactly what I want. Now, let me make this bigger so we can see it. This one, again, has B12, or sum, and then B12 colon D12, and that's these 3 cells here. Do escape, and I'm going to click my next one. Click up here. And you see it says B13 colon D13, still the sum function. And so it automatically recognized when I filled it down, it thought, well, okay, in row 12, he had B12 to D12. So in row 13, he must want B13 to D13. And that's not a bad assumption. It's correct. Okay, I'm going to double click this, make it smaller again. Now when he starts taking tests, and I fill in values, maybe there's 100 points possible on this test, 100 on that, 80 on this. Let's say you got a 92 on the first one, you got an 88 on the second one, and you got a 70 on the third one. As I fill those in, it will automatically update my total over here. Well, I got some issues. Formatting isn't quite right. We haven't added our category total either. I put a lot of effort in making my homework look good here, and I'm not very good at that, so I know this looks horrible. But let's say I want to copy this formatting down to here. This is one of the coolest features of Microsoft products, is if you click this, you'll see under the home, under the clipboard here, there's a format painter. And if you click that option, it's going to copy your formatting to the clipboard, and then when you come down here, you can click on this cell and it'll apply that formatting to it. If I click total here, it's red, so I click the format painter, and then I come down here and click my other total, and it'll copy the formatting to it. Whatever formatting I might have here, I could highlight the range if I wanted to, or you could highlight just one of them. If I do format painter, come down here, highlight that. And I went ahead and applied it to this, so if I added more text in here, it would work. Notice this goes from B12 to D12. Well, probably if I put an E here, it'll work. But the question is, what about if I put an F? I leave a space there for some reason. Put 100 here, and I put 90 here. Notice it did not update my totals over here. That's because it was not right next to this. Let me delete that. And I come here, and I'll say test 4, 198. So it tries to recognize patterns. You know, if they're right next to each other, it's assuming, okay, well, they probably want that added into the total. If there's a space here, then Excel says, I have no clue what they're trying to do there, and doesn't add that in. So just something to keep in mind as you're working on like a grading spreadsheet or whatever you might be working on. Okay, now we want to copy this category total down. Now I can click here, and I got this highlighted, and I can click copy up here. This copies it to something called the clipboard. And now if I click where I want it down here and I do my paste, you'll notice that it also copied my formatting, copied where it's merged into one cell. Okay. So now maybe I want to copy this formula. So I do a copy. I'll click down here, and then I'll do a paste. Now I'm going to be shocked if this actually works. Now I notice it's still got a little line around here indicating that you can still copy. Escape gets rid of that in case you wonder. Well, I'm going to look at this formula. And it thinks, let me make it bigger so you can see it. So I do escape to get out of that formula view. Click up here. And I guess there's no way you could guess the percent. But notice it guessed the first part correctly. It says I3, I13 divided by I12. Receive points divided by total points. That's exactly what I wanted. But this one's worth 50%. So this 0.4 here at the end, 0.40, I want to put in my 0.50. That's going to be our 50%. And then press enter. Okay, now I can double click this to bring it back to the size it was. And we now have those two totals. Now what I'm doing to scroll down here is I'm using my mouse wheel. So I'm just moving that button in the middle of your mouse. Or you can use these scrolling over here to go down. You can use your arrow keys. As your arrow keys move down, then it goes. And one final thing I want is I want to have a final exam. The homework's 40%, tests are 50%. So final exam is going to be 10%. And again, I'll put total points possible here. Received points. I'll have the final there. And total points possible, let's say it's 250 points total. He got 175. I could, if I wanted, have a total, but since we only have one column, probably doesn't make much sense to have a total over here. But I do want a category total. So I click here, grab that. So I'm going to do a copy. Click down here, and I'll do a paste. I could grab this formula, but I'm guessing it won't have any clue what to change it to. But let's try that and just see. So I click that and do a copy. Come down here, click there, and do a paste. Division by 0. It had no clue what I wanted to do. Well, what I want to do is I want to take the received points divided by your total points times 10%. So I come down here, I'll click. You can click in there, bring up the old formula. If you do your backspace, it'll get rid of it. Equals. Remember, you don't have to actually type this out. You can click in the cell. So if I click receive points, do my slash for division by total points, times, the asterisk is times, and then I'll put in my 0.10 for 10%. And it'll give me my 7%. Now you might say, well, why copy it if it's just going to mess it up, and you know it's going to mess it up? Well, by copying it, I copied all the formatting. So it's 2 decimal places, it's percent. Now, I notice that my category total here, final exam, is 10%. I want to have the same formatting as this test, 50%. So if I click the test 50%, click Format Painter, and then click Final Exam, it'll look a little bit better. Okay, so now, down here I want the grade for the course. Well, I need to add some together. And here's where it probably does make sense not to use a sum, but to use the plus in between them. Remember how we always do formulas, is you do an equals. Now I'm going to scroll up to my first one. My first category total is this 34.29. So I'll click that. And then I'll put a plus. Now if I scroll back down here, you'll see D8 plus. And D8 is the intersection for our category total. The next one is D15. Again, you could click here or you could type D15. I'm going to type it. And it tries to help you. It tries to highlight in some kind of color what you've just put in there. And then plus. And then I'll put my last one, D22. Again, you can click in this cell or just type D22. And then press enter. Now, maybe when I'm all done with the course, I want it to actually have the grade here. So I can see that that's a B, so I can type a B beside it. If you want this to be different formatting, you can set it up to whatever you want. See how this is not centered, but this is. So maybe I want to choose these and center them. Maybe I want to choose my test 1, test 3, and test 4 and center the titles. Maybe I want this to be centered. Final exams, it's about the size of the column anyway, so center probably doesn't do a whole lot, but did a little bit. And then grade for the course. Now, I don't like white space. If I go to print this, if I do a file print, one document waiting. I wonder where I printed it is. It's been sitting waiting forever. But as I look at this, I don't like that white space. Some people do, some don't. I like grids. I like lines, especially if I'm doing part of it by hand, because you maybe you're not sitting at your computer constantly. So you have this printed off, and you want to be able to hand draw in, hand write the scores, and then later on put that into Excel. What I usually do, very quick way to do it, is up here in the upper left-hand corner. There's like a little dark gray triangle. If you click in the light one above it, so click right there, it'll select everything. And under Home and under Font, I do this drop down here, and I can tell what borders I want. And usually I say all borders, because I love borders. So you get that. So now if I haven't put these ones in here yet, and I clicked and held down my left mouse button to select those, and if I press delete, it'll clean those out. And he's still at a B. So now I can print that. Excuse me. And then that would be our spreadsheet that I print. But anyway, that's how you can create a grading spreadsheet and apply certain fonts and so forth. Is there any questions on any of that?
So then if at the bottom it shows those different sheets that you named, would you just do the same kind of formats? Can you take a format from one page to another page?
You can. Like if you like what you did here, you click this upper left-hand corner again, and it selects everything. If you choose copy, then you come over here, and if you have your first one selected, choose paste. It'll paste all that in. And then you can change that however you want. You can also right-click on this to the English, and I think there's a duplicate somewhere. Maybe I'm wrong. Move or copy. But choose move or copy. And then it tells us to move the selected sheet to, but specifically then it says create a copy. That's where you can create a new copy looking exactly like this one. But I'm not sure if it copies the formatting. Move it to the end, create a copy. Okay, so that's okay there. So now English 2, let me click it. Looks like English 2 kept all the formatting also. So that's another way you can do it. And then if you don't want that to say English 2, you just double click it. And type sociology or whatever you have there. Sociology. I don't think any high school student takes that. I think my son has. What is he working on now? He's working on his driver's manual. We bought a curriculum for helping him learn how to drive. So he's working on that. Okay, so that's creating that, and that's creating it going across. you could use that same concept and fill it down. Now let me just show you just kind of a general setup on how to fill it down. To create a new spreadsheet, you do a File, New, and these are all ones that are templates included. And it could be that you're going to find one in here that you can use directly, where you don't even have to change it. Grade book. So I typed in grade book. I'm finding nothing. Grades. Here's a teacher's grade book based on points. Here's one based on percentage. One based on averages. So sometimes if you click this and use this, it'll give you instructions on what to do exactly. You still have to understand a little bit. What do they mean G7? So that's why the basics of Excel you have to still know. But over here, then you can adjust this. Let's say I had 2 students. Probably have to be in the same class if I had to guess. Otherwise, you're never going to get these to match up. You see it generically says column 6. This is where you change this to section 1.1, section 1.2. Hayes, HomeSchool. I forgot what we registered our name as. Teacher name here. Enter teacher name in this cell. So it tries to give me a wife, Sherry Hayes. I'd have to read instructions. I'm not even sure how this works. But you can set your letter grade, looks like, or maybe it's set for you. You put values in here. And if I understood what I was doing, you'd probably see this score updated. So it does a lot of that already set up for you. Okay, now I'm going to show the different layouts. Let me do a File, New, blank workbook. And let's say I want to do homework. Maybe I'm going to put in how much it's worth here. So it's worth 40%. And make this a little bit bigger so you can actually see it. And then I'm going to have my my total percent up here. Maybe total points. Possible. Total receive points. And down here, I'm going to list the individual sections. So section 1.1, section 1.2, and so forth. The thing about Excel is it tries to figure out patterns. Like if I click this first one and hold down and select that second one, see how they're both highlighted. If I grab that bottom right-hand corner, it becomes a black plus, and click and hold down and fill it down, then it tries to guess what I'm wanting to put there. Sometimes it works, sometimes it's not so great. Doesn't look like I left enough room here, not on purpose, but it does demonstrate how to insert a row. If I have this row selected and I do a right click and choose Insert, then it can insert an entire row. You click OK. And that scoots everything down. Now, this column, I'm going to have total points. And this one will be receive points. Now I'm going to double click between B and C to make that a little bit bigger. Maybe section 1.1 is worth 30 points. He received 28. Section 1.2 is 40 points. He got 27. Then 50 points, and he got all 50. Now, the benefit of this is if I have 50 sections that he's going to work on during the entire year, when I go to print this, it's not going to be such that I'd have to like tape them side to side in order to see the entire picture. It's going to be in this vertical format where I can just thumb through the pages. But I want the total points possible to be here on the first page. And then the individual detail down here. Well, how do I do that? Well, first let me merge these cells together. So I'm going to click this C1 and I highlight over to D1. And I highlight it by pressing my left mouse button and dragging over. And now I do my merge and center. Now I'll do the same thing with receive points. Merge and center. Now this is going to be a sum. And if I click the auto sum, it's probably not going to have any clue what I want to do. See, if I click that, it's leaving a blank. It says I have no clue what you're up to. Now this is going to be my total points. So I'm going to click and hold down my left mouse button and drag and fill it all the way down. And it'll automatically put in C5 to C13. And if that's what I want, then I press enter. And you see your total points there. Now receive points. I could do the same trick, or I could even type it in. If I do equals sum, beginning parentheses, my starting cell, which is D5, colon, my ending cell, which is D13. And then closing parentheses, and then press enter. Now you might look at that and say, well, that's nice, but you don't have the category total. No, I don't. Not yet. Yeah, and I notice I probably need another row here. So I got this cell selected. I can right-click, choose Insert, Entire Row. And that shifts it down again. And here I'll put in Category Total. Again, it's probably beneficial if I merge that in. So I click this, drag over, choose Merge and Center. And here's where I'll put my formula. So I do an equals. I'm going to take my receive points, which is E2, divided by my total points, which is E1, times my percent, which was an A2. That was this over here. Question is if I put this in correctly. I put 40 in, I put 40%. So how did it save it? Well, let's see. If I press enter, that didn't look right. But if I click here and then click my percent format, probably looking right at it. There it is. That looks good. And I could increase the number of decimal places if I wanted. Now as I add new sections in, if next one's worth 40 points and he got 28, it will automatically update that. 80, 70, 60, 20, 10. I'm learning how smart Excel really is, in case you're wondering. Okay, so let's say I didn't get all my sections in there. I want to add a new section. I do section 110. Come over here, put 40. And I put 20. And you notice it did not update. This is still going from C6 to C14. That's probably the most frustrating part, is sometimes, you make that bigger so you can see it. Sometimes Excel's smart enough to know what you're doing. Sometimes you have to manually adjust that. Since we added another row, and we're now down to row 15, I need to change this 14 to a 15. You just click up there, press delete, type in a new number, or press new number and press delete, either way. And it helps if I put the right number in there. C15. And then press enter. It's got even a little green triangle in the upper left-hand corner here. And there's a little sign here. It says this formula in itself refers to a range that has additional numbers adjacent to it. Because we added that additional row. If you do the drop down, it tries to guess what you want to do. And you say, okay, update formula to include those cells. So if I click that, it will automatically change this to include row 15. Let's see that again. Let me put a section 111 here, 80 and 80. All of a sudden, I got that little green triangle in the upper left-hand corner again. So I click this. My little cell says, hey, you got adjacent numbers to it. Adjacent means a lot in Excel. Adjacent is what indicates how it tells a pattern. Then if I do the drop down, a little arrow there, I can say update formula to include those cells. Click this one, update formula to include cells. Either way, if you ever see that little green mark there, you should go and investigate it. Because that means that it thinks that maybe your formula is wrong, is what it's trying to tell you. Now there's, and then I could do, after this, I could put the test % here. I could put the final exam here, and I could put the total at the bottom. So you can see there's a lot of different ways you could set this up. This is also the same, some of the same formatting, some of the same options that you can have if you're creating a transcript. Inserting a column somewhere. You just click where you want to put that column, you right-click, choose Insert. And I want to insert an entire column. It scooted everything over. And even surprisingly, it didn't mess my formulas up. You see, I think that's still 39%. I was watching it. And it guessed, let me see, that's receive points I screwed it over. If I click here, received points says now it's E6 to E16. So again, it was smart enough to recognize that if I inserted that column, it wouldn't mess up the data. I don't know what that means. Insert options. Format same as left, format same as the right, clear formatting. So okay. Making things look nice. Talk about some of those. There's the fonts here. If I click that, I can choose my different fonts. Colors we've already looked at. You can change the size of it. Sometimes when I'm making a different size, you need to redo your cell width or just merge it into one cell, because this is now going over to two cells. Again, we can highlight that, do merge and center. Just like that. Page layout. There's themes over here under page layout. If I do that drop down here, these are some different themes you can choose. So you see it changes fonts, changes sizes, looks. Probably looking right at it. Maybe I have to highlight. No? There's another place where you can do design elements, but I'm not seeing it. It's where if you got something, you can mark it a specific way so it'll appear like a heading of some sort. Yeah, I don't know why I can't see that. But it could be I'm mixing it up with Word. Where that's important is if you had a child that was trying to use your spreadsheet, trying to use a screen reader on it and so forth. Marking something with a header is different than just changing the size of it, the bold, and so forth. So that's why I'm shocked that they wouldn't have some kind of feature in here to do that. I'm sure it's here somewhere. It's just not real obvious. Not seeing it at all. But if you just want to change different cell styles, for example, you choose that. You can have it a different color. Again, that's not going to help somebody who's got some kind of visual impairment because they need to read it to them. And that's where you say this is a header 1. This is header 2 or header 3. Then somebody who's reading that is like, oh, okay, I know what that means. That really bothers me. Now to print this, you go to your page layout. And there's different options over here for under your themes. You can have the different colors and so forth. The idea on this is if you set it up and you want it to look a specific way, you can choose violet always, and your spreadsheets always look that same have that same effect. Now that looks like I just changed one color here. That's because we're not using any colors throughout. You got your effects that you can have. There won't mean anything with just our data we have here. Your margins. Sometimes when I print, it will not print on one page, and I find that frustrating. Like if I go to File Print on this, that's all printing on one page, so that's good. I'm happy with that. But let's say I had a few more columns in here. Entire column. Make these a different size. That's what I want. Maybe I got a bunch of data in here. If I do my file print, still on there. Well, let's make it a little bit bigger. Hopefully that won't be on there anymore. I do a file print. And all of a sudden that next column is on the next page. And if I come here and click this, change to the next page, and I see it's over there. Well, that's maybe not what I want. You can change margin. Sometimes that helps. And I'll show that here in a minute. You can change orientation. Instead of printing Instead of printing this way, it'll print this way, or vice versa, depending upon what you have set. So if I choose the orientation, have it print landscape. Now if I do my file print, then it's on the page. And you see what it looks like. Now down here in the bottom right-hand corner, I'm under the normal option right here. So this is normal. Right beside it is page layout. And right beside that is page break preview. If I choose page layout, this gives you an idea of what it's going to look like. So this is in our landscape mode. If I change it to portrait, you see how my data goes on the second page. I wouldn't recommend creating spreadsheets in this view, but it's useful if you're trying to fit everything on one page at the end. If I come here to the margins now, and there's normal margins, wide margins, narrow margins. Those are pre-configured, thinking that maybe that's what you want. If I choose narrow margins, no, that fits on. And I'm specifically still set up as portrait. So if I like my to put into, what was that? I was looking at an ebook 2 days ago. Had a statistics question. And I was looking at the ebook online, and it had printed tables with the landscape. And by printing on landscape, in a normal book, you have to turn the book. Well, since it's on the computer, I couldn't turn the book, so I had to turn my head sideways so I could see that table. Oh, I hated that because I was trying to my eyes. I have trouble with my eyes, so I was trying to go from the down here over to where it should be, the intersection of the tables. Wasn't having luck. Even more, when you're in this, you can come up here and see how between the G and H, if I put my mouse here, it makes it a black line with arrows on each side. If I click and hold down, you can automatically modify it here. So you can get it to fit on one page by playing with that. You can change fonts. Maybe that's too big. So I go back to home, and I'm changing it to 12 to try to get everything to fit on. You can add headers at the top. This would appear on every page. So if I had 10 pages, this header would appear on every page. So I could type my grade summary. Not very big. You can highlight this. I click with my left mouse button, drag over. Sometimes you can double click. Or not. Okay, I'll highlight like that. I go to home. Change that to 14. It's already centered. Make it bold. Maybe underline it. My grade summary. Again, the benefit of that is it's going to print on every sheet then. You can scroll down just like any other worksheet. I never have done anything with this. But if you want to print, let's say you're working for a church and you're creating a mailing, and you want to do a mass mailing to all of your all the people that attend your services. And well, if you choose some of these, maybe you want to print it on envelopes. Print on labels. Labels is probably where I've seen it the most. Labels are pretty good. You got some of those, used to be called Avery labels. My wife hadn't had me print those for quite a while, but I print her address labels. And so telling it specific items here will help figure out how they want to print it. If you got legal paper. All my copier does at home is letter, 8.5 by 11. So I've never done any of these other ones, but I know what they're for. Let's see, print area. That's if you want to highlight part of it and set your print area. You got scale here. I start changing that. Now we got our height, we got our width. I'm talking more about that scale here in a minute. Grid line headings. You see that you can view them, but if you want to print them, you just come over here and you click print. And when that prints, it'll print those light gray lines in there. Remember how I showed you how to put the border on there before, and it told you I like borders. If you like borders, but you don't want it to be intrusive, then you can do this. We can do a print on those. Now, if I do a file print, actually, let me change this slightly. There we go. Notice how I got a header here, and it's the same header here. If I do a file print, had trouble finding this the other day, so hopefully I can find it relatively quickly. It was under the scaling. This prints sheets at their actual size. Oftentimes, if it's a close call, instead of me sitting there fiddling with it, trying to get it to work correctly, I come here and I say, okay, fit sheet on one page. And I choose that option. It'll try to fit everything onto one page. Now, if you got tons of columns, tons of rows, so forth, what you may find is that when it tries to fit on one page, it'll be so small you can't see it. So there's a trade-off there. But that's a very quick way to try to put everything on one page. Let me go back. You can spice up your grade sheet if you want. I'm going to go back to my normal view. So I come down here, click normal. If I want to spice this up a little bit, I can go to my insert, and we can add different items on here. You see there's a shapes. I come down here, and maybe I want to drop a shape on there, like a triangle. Now, I chose a triangle, but didn't change anything. But now, if I move my mouse down here in the main part, it's now a black plus. And if I click and hold down, it'll draw a triangle. Maybe you want that on there just to indicate it's math. Make it a little bit easier to see. Move that to the side. I just put my mouse over it. When it became 4 black arrows, I had clicked and held down, and I could drag it. Or you could change the size of it again. Sometimes maybe you want to maybe come up the sheet here, and you want to remember something later on, or point out something to somebody. If I go to insert, come up here, there's callouts down here. So I can choose this callout, drag and drop it, and if I click it, you see a little yellow circle. I'm going to click and hold down on that so I can grab it, move that to where the one I'm concerned with. And let's see. Okay, I click text box, and if I click here in the middle, I can say, look at this grade. That's probably especially useful if you're giving it to the student. Want to point something out. If you're trying to create some kind of clever little document, that combines the features of Excel with something you want to print off at the print on and put on a bulletin board. Then that allows you a lot of flexibility. You can pretty well do whatever you want on that. You see I got my triangle here. So I could click the text box and click in here. Now type triangle. That's bad. I teach math too. Let's see. There, I think that's spelled right. Now click and move this to the side so that fits in. And you notice that when I have this selected here, there's a Format tab. When I don't have it selected, my Format tab's gone away. That's an important part of Excel, is whatever you have selected will determine what you see. So if you don't see your tab up here you're trying to find, it could be you don't have your item selected. Then if I click Format, different options you can do with it. You can have different styles, what it looks like. Different colors. Elbow arrow connector. Have it go down like that. You can create a little flow charting type of setup. Maybe you want to come up with a troubleshooting for your child. If I come up here and do an insert, do shapes, and I don't remember exactly how to do this, so you'll have to take that into account. I don't think this is right, but we'll go with it. Got a little box here, and I'll choose text box, and it's not printing. So is the print job is what you printed coming out. Coming out. Pretty small, that is. I don't know if I have to highlight it first or not. Let's see. I guess I do. Question is how do I highlight it all? There it goes. It's kind of hard to grab hold of. Now notice context sensitive options popped up here, and I can choose that. If I highlight this and I choose the centered, I'll click outside there and click there's a black arrow. I can move it to wherever I want. And then down here you can put another shape. So I do an insert, shape, and here's the flow charting stuff down here. And drag and drop it, or drag it and resize it. And then down here, if I have this one selected, if I choose one of these items here, I click the circle where I want to come from, and I put it on the circle where I want to go to. And then I can put words on here. When I said I don't know if I'll be able to do it right or not, when you're creating some kind of flow like this, some boxes mean something. Like a rectangle means you can ask a question. I think actually not a triangle. I don't know which it is to ask a question, but there's not that it matters. But if I do an insert, That's bad. I guess I haven't flowcharted in a long time. Let's see, what's that say? Flowchart, that's a process. That means you perform something. Alternate process. Decision. Okay, so that's where you're asking a question. Is the printer turned on? Yes or no? And then you have one arrow coming out here for yes, one arrow coming out here for no. Flowchart data. I don't know what all these are, to be honest. Collate. No clue. Punch tape. Well, that's old. That's like mainframe days. But if this would be nice as a student project. If you had a student and you're asking them to document some process. A lot of people can't do that. I teach a statistics course online, and I ask, there's nursing students that are taking this, and I ask them to describe a math topic from that week. And I don't ask them just to work a problem. I ask them to describe the steps. And I want them to get to think about when you're trying to give somebody instructions in life, like how do I paint this room? Well, first thing I would do is I'd get permission from the college, but then I'd put down maybe the drop cloths, plastic, whatever you might have. Then I would how I would do it is I'd probably start painting. That's not the correct way. The correct way is you probably tape areas you don't get paint onto. I got this arrogant attitude that I'm so good that I can get it real close and not mess it up. But I do mess it up all the time. But I don't tape because it just seems real tedious. One of my rooms in my house, my wife hasn't let me paint it because I won't tape it. And I've told her, well, if you tape it, I'll paint it. Just getting down there and with the tape just seems so tedious. I know it works, but anyway, the room's still not painted. Let's see if there's anything else that's exciting. Let's see. The view. That's kind of a nice option. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down here. And let's say I want to always see what these columns are. I can freeze that. So if I click here at A6 and I choose freeze panes and I say freeze the rows and columns while the rest of the worksheet scrolls based on the current selection. If I click that there, it will freeze this and you see an extra line there. And now if I scroll down, I will always see which one's the total points, which one's the receive points. To unfreeze something, if you come up to the view up here under the freeze panes, you choose unfreeze panes. You don't even have to have that one selected. If I'm down here and I come up here and choose unfreeze panes, it'll unfreeze that. Now, if you want to freeze a row and a column, then if I click in this cell right here, C6, it'll freeze the row above it. It'll freeze the column to the left of it. So if I'm getting under the view and I choose freeze, and I choose freeze panes. Now as I scroll down, it always says that. If I were to scroll to the right, no matter what, that column is going to appear. This makes it quite useful if you got a lot of data. There's one college I've taught for in the past. They use a product called they're using Moodle, not Moodle Rooms. They're using Moodle, and it doesn't freeze the first column. So if I scroll over to the right, trying to see what the students' grades are, I no longer see the students' names. They've gone over to the far side here. Now this Moodle's not like a real backwards package. It's been around for a long time. They've put a lot of effort into it. So sometimes you see these options not even being done correctly in an established grade book or something. So when I have a student ask me what their grade is, I have to highlight the row and try to take my mouse and scroll over, highlighting that row as I go along until I get to the very end so I can see what their grade is. Alternatively, I can download it to Excel. I can download everybody's grades and freeze panes and go to the right. So depending upon how much time I have is whether I download it to Excel or I just kind of highlight the row and drag over. But that freeze panes is nice. About any grading package you work with will have an export to Excel format. So if it doesn't say export to Excel, it might say export to CSV, in which case Excel can still read it. Let's see. Some of this I cover in a second workshop and even a third workshop. So if you're really interested in Excel, I got one where we cover they're working with data. That's a sort and filter. Another part of data is charting, creating graphs. And then the third workshop that I've created in the past is for creating formulas. And so again, if you're interested in any of those, just let me know and I'll put those on the schedule. But that's really all I had to show for today for off of the first workshop. Is there any questions or anything you want to see or anything?
I think when you were looking at the formulas page or tab up there, did it? I'm not sure. I thought it said something like, oh, so on that date and time or lookup and reference and stuff like that, what does that? Is that a formula that shows for the whole page, or is it just a certain section of the page? I'm not sure what that means.
It's up to you.
Okay.
For example, let's say I want to put the current date on here. If I go to the Formulas tab, not every version of Excel has this. So if you got an older version of Excel, you may not have this feature here. If you don't have this feature, if you click this FX right here, that's been in Excel forever. And it'll bring this up, and it'll have a category list. You do the drop down here, and it has the same functions. This is just a user-friendly way of doing it. So if I choose a date, and if I choose now returns the current date. And let's try that again. It's because I mixed these. I think I clicked there and clicked that. But if I click that and I choose now, I guess it does pop up with that. I'll just click OK there, and then it prints the current date. Each time I come into the spreadsheet, it'll update that. If I had a date and I want to extract the month, well, then I come up here. There's a date and time. You see there's a month feature. And if I choose the month, then it pops up with this and says, okay, well, where do you want to get it from? And I could click up here in cell A1 and then click OK. And it returns 2 for the month. So some of these work on single cells. Some of them will work on multiple cells. The lookup and reference you're talking about, this is where you could have a lookup table over here. Yeah, try it again. I think that's Wyoming. So you have a lookup table over here for your states. And in a spreadsheet, if somebody was putting in their like sales and state and so forth, I may not be able to get this right. I always have to refresh my memory on doing this lookup. But they put 3,000 in for sales, 4,000 or 4,000, 5,500. They put in Kansas, Wyoming. Then you do an equals. Well, don't do an equals because you can choose your lookup here. And it's either H lookup or V lookup. Let me see what I think it's V. Top row. Oh, no, that's not it. It's V lookup. There it is. I was looking right at it. This is the lookup value I want to use. This is the value to be found in the first column of the table, can be a value, reference, or text string. And I'm looking up this right here, the KS, B4. Table array. Well, if I click this button to the right of it, I can come over here to Sheet. And for my table array, I select all of these, like that. So A1 to B3. Click that to go back. Column index number. Well, column index number is my first column, which I think is 0. First column, which is 0, is my abbreviation. My second column is my state name. So I'm going to put 1 for the second column. We'll see if this works or not. And then range lookup, I think you put false for exact match. Now, I'm not real comfortable with that because it's returning KS. So let me, instead of that, put a 2. You see how it returns Kansas? Then if I fill that down, well, it's because I need some absolute referencing here. Absolute referencing is when it's always pointing to the same location. Like B4 is fine, but I want this to be $A, $1, $B, $3. Enter. And now when I fill it down, it'll work. Even more than that, when I change something, like if I put Missouri here, it will automatically update that. You were asking, is it to that sheet? Is it to a cell? What is it to exactly? It could be anything. So this lookup here is looking it up over here in this separate sheet. So if you had something real tedious where you're having to look up 100 items every day, for example, if you use that V lookup and you set it up correctly, it does those 100 lookups for you automatically. So maybe the 2 hours worth of work you did is taken care of in 1 second. Now this right here, we'll get into this in a lot more detail in like a formulas workshop, but you can choose to show your formulas over here. Like if you choose show formulas, that'll show what you have. You may have to resize it. To uncheck that puts your values back there. Yeah, lots of different options you can do there. Did that answer your question?
Yes. Thank you.
You're welcome. Did you have any other questions?
I don't have anything else specific right now.
Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and stop the recording, and I'll upload this to the Facebook